In today's video, we're diving into one of the most transformative and controversial periods of recent American history, the presidency of Ronald Reagan and the economic challenges of the 1980s. From soaring national debt to a powerful conservative resurgence, Reagan's era changed the political and economic landscape of the United States for decades to come. Let's explore how a former Hollywood actor became the champion of supply side economics, reduced government programs, and ignited a cultural and political revolution. Let's get started. Ronald Reagan wasn't just a politician, he was a performer. A former actor with a flair for the dramatic and a deep love of American traditions, Reagan appealed to many Americans with his nostalgic references to the good old days and patriotic speeches. His communication skills earned him the nickname the Great Communicator, and he used these skills to promote a conservative vision of government and economics. Central to Reagan's message was a belief that government was more of a problem than a solution.
The economic ills we suffer have come upon us over several decades. They will not go away in days, weeks, or months, but they will go away. They will go away because we, as Americans, have the capacity now, as we've had in the past, to do whatever needs to be done to preserve this last and greatest bastion of freedom. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
During his first term, Reagan advanced a domestic program rooted in new federalism, a policy previously championed by Republicans like Dwight D. Eisenhower and Richard Nixon. The idea was to shift certain social welfare responsibilities from the federal government to the states, believing that local governments were better equipped to manage them. Reagan's base, often referred to as the Reagan Coalition, included a small but influential group of wealthy Americans who believed in unrestricted capitalism. These individuals viewed the free market as the best solution to societal problems and were deeply skeptical of government regulations, especially those they considered anti business. Reagan's policies, in large part, served this group's interests. One of Reagan's most well known and controversial economic strategies was supply side economics, which critics dubbed trickle down economics. His administration called for sweeping tax cuts for both businesses and individuals, particularly those with higher incomes. The logic was that these individuals and corporations would reinvest their money into businesses, creating jobs and increasing the supply of goods and services. Reagan argued that this approach would curb inflation without ballooning the national debt. His economic plan became known as Reaganomics. However, skeptics at the time were not convinced. They labeled it voodoo economics and compared it to the flawed trickle down strategies of the 1920s, where the wealthy prospered and the middle and lower classes saw limited benefits. And indeed, by the end of the 1980s, the wealth gap in America was wider than it had been since the end of World War II. Reagan promised to balance the federal budget, but that proved far easier said than done. To cut spending, more than $40 billion was slashed from domestic programs like food stamps, student loans, and mass transit. He also made substantial cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency, reflecting his belief that environmental regulations hindered business growth. However, not all programs faced the chopping block. Medicare and Social Security, still extremely popular with the American public, remain mostly untouched. In fact, Reagan signed a bipartisan bill to strengthen Social Security during his presidency. Reagan also pushed for tax law simplification and enacted tax cuts for around 60% of Americans. While these cuts were meant to stimulate economic growth, critics charged that they disproportionately favored the wealthy. And despite the deep domestic cuts, the national debt continued to rise. A major reason? Military spending soared during Reagan's time in office. Combine that with a growing trade imbalance, as America imported far more than it exported, and it became clear that Reagan's economic strategy had its limits. Beyond the economy, the 1980s saw a major shift in American politics. Reagan's presidency marked the rise of modern conservatism, a renewed emphasis on traditional social values, and a diminished role for government defined this era. One early sign was Proposition 13 in California, a 1979 measure that drastically cut property taxes and ended free college tuition in the state. It signaled growing conservative power at the local and state levels, a trend that accelerated through the 1980s and peaked in 1994 when Republicans took control of the House of Representatives for the first time in 50 years. But this movement wasn't limited to economics and taxes. A new generation of social conservatives joined the fight, engaging in so called culture wars. They pushed back against progressive social policies and fought battles over homosexuality, abortion, immigration, gender roles, and family structures. Republicans in this era frequently opposed immigration and worked to overturn Roe v. Wade at both state and federal levels. At the same time, many Christian fundamentalists often aligned with the Republican Party and advocated for teaching creationism or intelligent design over evolution in public schools. Many even turned to private schools or homeschooling to avoid what they viewed as secular or liberal teachings in public education. These cultural debates didn't end with Reagan's presidency. They continue to influence American politics and education to this very day. Ronald Reagan's presidency left an indelible mark on America. His optimistic vision, tough rhetoric, and deep belief in the free market won him the support of millions. Yet his economic legacy is complex. While he curbed inflation and revitalized conservative ideology, his policies also contributed to rising income inequality and a ballooning national debt. Politically, the Reagan era ushered in a new age of conservatism that reshaped American society, from government spending to education and social values. And whether you view him as a hero or a flawed leader, there's no denying Reagan changed the conversation, one that still goes on in this country to this very day. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.